The house that once echoed with Margaret Lewis's quiet footsteps now felt strangely hollow. Emily noticed it first, not with guilt but with irritation. The kitchen was too silent in the mornings. The floors were still clean, but there was no one scrubbing them. Dinner didn't magically appear on the table. For the first time, Emily had to lift a finger. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, throwing her handbag onto the couch. Where could she possibly go? Daniel stood near the window, staring outside as if Margaret might suddenly appear at the gate. He hadn't slept properly since the day she vanished. Guilt gnawed at him, sharp and relentless. "She wouldn't just leave without a reason," he said quietly. Emily scoffed. "Oh, please. She's old, dramatic, and stubborn. She probably went to stay with some relative." But deep down, Emily felt something else, fear. Because Margaret hadn't taken her clothes. She hadn't taken jewelry. She had taken documents. The realization hit Emily when she searched the old metal trunk, hidden in the storage room. It was gone. Her hands trembled. That night, Emily barely slept. Memories replayed in her mind, snide remarks, orders barked like commands. The way Margaret lowered her eyes and stayed silent. For the first time, the silence felt threatening. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Daniel opened the door to find a courier holding a thick envelope. "Daniel Lewis?" "Yes." "You've been served." The words echoed in the hallway like a gunshot. Inside the envelope was a legal notice. The house, the savings, the land, everything legally owned by Margaret Lewis. The document stated clearly that Daniel and Emily were residing there without any legal right. They were given 2 options: vacate the house or pay monthly rent. Emily screamed, "This is a lie! She can't do this!" Daniel sank into a chair, his face pale. He remembered his father's words long ago. "This house is your mother's safety." He had laughed then, young and careless. Now it felt like a curse he had ignored. A week later, the courtroom was filled with tense silence. Margaret entered calmly, supported by a lawyer. She looked different, not broken, not tired. There was dignity in her posture that Emily had never seen before. Emily avoided her gaze. The lawyer spoke of years of unpaid labor, emotional abuse, forced servitude disguised as family duty. Witnesses were presented, neighbors, who had seen Margaret working endlessly, relatives who remembered her being ordered around during gatherings. Daniel's chest tightened with every word. When Margaret finally spoke, her voice was steady. "I raised my son with love. I gave him everything I had. I never imagined that in my old age, I would be treated as less than human in my own home." Emily looked up sharply. "I never asked for luxury," Margaret continued. "I only asked for respect." The judge listened carefully. The verdict was clear. Margaret Lewis retained full ownership of all her property. Daniel and Emily were given 30 days to vacate unless a formal rental agreement was signed under Margaret's terms. Emily broke down outside the courtroom, not in remorse but rage. "This is your fault," she yelled at Daniel. "You chose her over me." Daniel said nothing. Weeks passed. Margaret moved into a small, peaceful apartment near a park. She woke up without fear, without orders, without insults. She hired help when needed, paid them fairly, and treated them kindly because she knew the weight of invisible labor. One afternoon, Daniel visited her. He stood awkwardly at the door, eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I failed you." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I forgive you," she said softly. But forgiveness does not mean returning to the same pain. Daniel understood. Emily never came. Months later, the old house was sold. Emily left soon after, unable to accept a life where power was no longer hers. Daniel moved into a smaller place, humbled by loss and truth. Margaret, once the unpaid housekeeper, now lived with peace. Because sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is patience, waiting for the right moment to reclaim dignity.